So to start out, of course, because this model's eyes are closed, we're going to have to just do 2 eyelid ones, and it's just going to be set up like this and down to the top and bottom lid. And I'm not going to bother with anything more complicated than that. So top lid joint, bot lid joint, just so I can know what they are when I'm in the paint skin weights tool. I'm going to create a joint just here to hold the rest of the weight on the face. Grab these guys. Oh, I should have named this one top lid tip joint, bot lid tip joint. So we'll grab those 2, grab the filler one, we're going to grab the eye, the body, and we're going to go to bind skin. So now, if I were to just open the eyes, it's just going to do that, because of course it's on default skin weights, and that's going to be pretty atrocious. So what I'm going to do to just quickly get better skin weights is I'm going to grab a loop around the eye, if it'll let me. And I just need to, okay. Actually, I'll just flood. Oh, so it. Bind skin. I accidentally did it when it had joint hierarchy on, so I'm just going to have to rebind with selected joints so that we don't get these 2 as influences. So now we have 1 influence, 2 influences, and the filler one. I'm going to flood it to the middle one so the other 2 don't do anything, and then I'll start adding some weight to the top lid. Where is still an enormous brush. And I don't want to spend too much time just painting skin weights because that's not exciting and you don't learn anything. So once it gets passable at best, that's when I'll start doing the fleshy eye. And that looks passable at best. I'm going to grab this one and I'll just set, I need to grab this one. I'll set 2 rotation keys on this one and go in and paint some weight onto the bottom lid. That's fine, Noah. That's okay, Noah. The mic can't pick you up, so I can say you said whatever. That's incredibly racist, Noah. Never say that again. Okay, so now we have...
Looks like you're like,
What?
It looks like you're like stretching it.
Yeah, so now we have just an incredibly nice, incredibly beautiful eyelid rig, and we're going to set up fleshy eye. And so what needs to happen is that fleshy area around the eye needs to move just when you rotate the eyeball underneath. And the easiest way to do that is not with another joint, but actually with a cluster on top of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab the entire head, or sort of the area around the eye, and I'm going to do deform cluster. And then I'm going to move its pivot point to the center of the eye. So DV snap. Did it snap to the right spot? Almost definitely not. Yep. Yeah, this model is from hippiedrome.com, which is the website for Brian Tyndall, who is the deformation artist at Pixar. So right now, rotating this thing does all kinds of just awful things. So I'm going to, did I just break it forever? No. I'm going to rotate it up a little bit just so we can see what it looks like with the full deformation on, and obviously that is too fleshy. That's moving it around too much. So I'm going to come in here and go down to paint weights and go to cluster, because I can actually paint off weight the cluster has. You don't have to have 100% influence on a vertice with a cluster deformer. So I'm just going to start painting out the area that I don't want influenced by the fleshy eye cluster, just like you would if you were doing a blend shape or just painting skin weights. Don't want any on the nose or on the bridge of the nose. Don't really want any up that high. And you can also smooth, just like you're painting skin weights. And so that's probably still too much, but we'll see how it looks. That's definitely still too much. So I'll paint out some more, just by coming around here and replacing it with 0. This is probably going to be the fastest way, replacing it with 0 and then smoothing it, just because I want to cut out this area entirely, because I don't want any up on the... Not sure what just happened there, but cut out this area where it's influencing the brow, and then kind of smoothing. And if you were doing this for real, like on a nice produced rig, you'd probably want to spend more time. So now it's looking a little bit fleshy. Probably too much influence on the cheek, but that's good enough just for the demo right now. So now the order that you need to do this in is you'd have to have a control out here that's just being aimed at by your eye joint, and I will actually rig up the eye just with a single joint to show what I'm talking about. So right now nothing is bound to the eye, so I'll just put another joint here at the center. Name it eye joint, and skin it here. Select this control, select eye joint, constrain, aim, maintain offset on. So now when I move this, it's going to move the eye, and then we want the cluster to be moved as well. So we can just make the cluster a child of the eye joint. So now when we do this, the cluster is also being rotated. If I go back, oh my goodness.
It didn't happen.
That didn't happen. Where did... There we go. Oh, that's a weird Maya thing. How clusters can be really persnickety about the world space that you're using. Like right now I have it a group and it's a child of the eye joint, and if you group it and make it a child, it will not acknowledge any of the weights that you've painted. But if I were to take this and then parent constrain it, it should behave itself properly. Yeah. Now you can see that the eye is fleshy, it's moving around when the eye moves. Something's weird with my manipulator here. So it's fleshy like that, and also these controls will still work. Is it not going to let me go to rotate? Or did I paint the weight on the wrong one? Oh, that's the eye joint that I just rotated. So the top lid can still open, and the bottom lid can still open, and they will move around. The W hotkey is not working. They will move around with this fleshy eye. And of course that's looking definitely overly fleshy, but we're not spending that much time weighting everything. But that's the general principle that you could use to set up a fleshy eye. You could use a joint instead of a cluster, but I found clusters easier. Does that make sense as a technique to do fleshy eyes?
Do you want to put a fleshy eye on every rig?
What?
Do you want to put one on every case that you're doing?
If it's like a cartoony rig, probably not, because they may have like a really distinct silhouette or shape to the face, and that's going to mess with it. On something that's going to be more photorealistic, or even just like realistic, but kind of stylized, like How to Train Your Dragon, which is like kind of cartoonish proportions, but it is like very visually photorealistic, you'd want to have fleshy eye, because that's what you'd be expected to see. So we're all good? There are no questions about fleshy eye setups? Okay.
You can constrain the cluster to the joint, not the control, right?
Yes, to the joint. because it needs to rotate around that same pivot. And you could actually, another thing that you can do to kind of quickly adjust it, like right now that is definitely too fleshy, I can come into the cluster, and clusters have an envelope value, so I can actually just adjust that envelope as another way to kind of just dial down the weights across the entire cluster. So that looks less fleshy. Let's take it down to like 0.1. And now it's just barely moving, which is probably closer to what you'd want on most characters. It's just kind of pushing it around like a little bit of contact. So you could achieve that with a combination of adjusting the cluster's envelope or just painting weights so that they are that low. I'm glad that I remembered because this can actually show off what a fleshy eye should look like. I'll save this out in case anybody wants to look at it.
Is it going to be posted to the Facebook page?
Yeah, or we can put it in the collab space.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That might be better.
Yep. So that is fleshy eyes. Pretty simple stuff. At least now that you know a faster technique to do them. What was the next thing that you guys were like chatting about?
No one really wants to see cheeks.
Cheeks?
Yes.
What?
The next thing you were talking about was whether or not you die when you go to sleep.
Okay.
Oh, so
Yeah?
one more question about the fleshy eyes.
Okay.
Would you put those on your local rig or your sorry, I forgot the global?
I would put it on a local rig because dealing with world space and other kind of transformations on a cluster is a pain. Yeah. So cheeks, like what about cheeks? Like cheeks puffing, just
Puffing and like moving or tweaking, both going up and down.
Okay, so I'll start out with tweaking. Tweaking you can usually just achieve with one joint, but something important to note is that you want it to kind of be inside of the face, so it's grabbing all of the flesh. It's not just like grabbing a point on the surface. So one of the ways to kind of visually see that is if you create a NURB sphere and just kind of make it the child of the joint, you can kind of see the area that it would be influencing. So I'm trying to place it so that it's kind of inside of there and it's going to be grabbing influence on a different section of the face. And then I'll just delete the NURB sphere. I'll need to create a new filler joint, so I deleted the one from the fleshy eye. Yeah. Skin bind skin. And so let's check it out with default skin weights. Just dragging this around. That's too much. There we go. Mine is being a little unresponsive. Like I have this selected, but it's still showing these weird selection handles on the other object. So we'll come in here and I'll flood everything to the filler joint, and then I will start just adding some weight around here where I need the joint to be. And we'll see how that looks. So that's grabbing close to the area that we want. I'll actually set a key and just kind of drag it out so that we can just drag through the time slider as we're painting and we can see what that motion looks like. So we probably want to smooth it out more from the center so it doesn't have like that plateau. It's just like a nice smooth bulge. Probably need some more weight here on the back because it kind of turns sharply. So I'm going to turn down my opacity and my value, so I'm just painting a little bit of weight on back there. I just turned down opacity and value pretty low so that I'm only painting a little bit of weight, because if I were to set it too high, it could all of a sudden jump to a new deformation. This just gives you a little bit more precision.
You kind of think of opacity like the hardness of a brush?
Well,
how hard you're hitting the surface? It's not actually the hardness.
Well, opacity is just like opacity in Photoshop. It's like how transparent your brush would be. You can just think of it as, it's like the value, how much you're painting on with one stroke is the value multiplied by the opacity. So if I turn them both down, it's going to be a really low value. There is actually a softness to the brushes in Maya, we show that off in the paint weights. Like this is a softer brush than this one, and this one has no softness. It's just going to paint 100% to that entire circle of influence. So let's see how that looks now. So that's looking a lot better with just a little bit of time. We're probably still missing some volume down here. So we'll paint more volume down below and smooth it out. And that pretty quickly looks like a nice cheek tweak control. Mine is completely frozen, but it's still updating down here.
Which viewpoint? Viewport are you?
I think I'm just in perspective, but
Go to another one.
is this?
The screen recorder not playing.
That's very strange. Panel's perspective. Select. Yeah, like none of this stuff's updating now. I'm going to close Maya. Like it says it's still responding, but it clearly isn't.
That's been happening to mine actually too, here at the school.
So I'm going to open it up again. And so, I mean, unfortunately we lose that stuff because we didn't save it. But you saw how that works well as a cheek tweak. The reason you'd want to use like a joint as opposed to anything else for a cheek tweak, like you could do a blend shape, but a blend shape you'd need to create one for every direction that you're moving the cheek in. With a joint, you just set it up once and get a nice deformation, and then it automatically gives you every pose that you could move the joint into. But one of the things that that's not going to help you with is kind of that cheek puff, because it looks very different when you're pulling part of the cheek to when you're puffing at your cheeks like this. Because the vertices aren't moving like in a straight line that you're pulling them in, they all need to move radially from a different point to create more of a spherical shape, especially if your character is cartoonish. So let me pull back in that model.
So are you doing a blend shape for that top?
So I'm going to show a blend shape would be pretty easy to set up. You just like sculpt it in that shape and dial in the blend shape, but I'm going to show another one, and this can actually be used in tandem with a blend shape, because you can use this method to create the blend shape. So how many people have used a soft mod deformer? Okay, I don't use them very often either. So we are going to create a sphere, a NURB sphere, and we're going to pull it up and put it inside the face. And then we are going to come up here to deform and come down to, sculpt. So we need to select the mesh and then select the NURB sphere and really make sure all the settings are good. Mode is split, inside even, max displacement, all looks okay, and we can adjust it after the fact. But the most important one to have in this setting is use secondary NURBS or polygon object, because that will use whatever you've selected as like the sculpting tool or the thing that has influence. If you don't have this selected, it's just going to create a little kind of locator that'll be used as the influence. So I'll create, and right now, oh, that's definitely not in the right place. But we, it doesn't matter right now it doesn't matter where you create it, but it does matter where it winds up. So here it is right now, and this is in a much better place to create a cheek puff. If I start scaling it out, you'll see that it does that. So I'll come into the sculpt thing, and I'll change maximum displacement, kind of coming in here to find the correct settings, because depending on your model, you might need different ones. Like project is not doing it for me. It looked like flip was giving us the best results, even though they weren't great. Come on, Maya. So when we scaled that out, it started to break at a certain point. We need to keep it from doing that. So I'm going to turn up maximum displacement and bring that one in. So now we're getting it like this. What's happening that would cause it to like flip inside out is it looks at the original position of the geometry. So let me scale it up so that it breaks. So it breaks right here, and that is because it is looking at the original position of the vertices, and it is either pushing them out if they're outside the sphere or pulling them in if it's inside the sphere. And we have scaled up the sphere so much that it has actually brought some of the vertices' original positions inside of itself. So to combat that, we just scaled it down, and then we increased the max displacement. So now it looks like that. So this is looking okay for about 2 minutes or so of work. But what you can do is you can adjust how much scaling you want on it, which is set-driven keys. And then, of course, we can use blend shape weights again. So right now, this guy is definitely grabbing too much weight down here in the jaw. When you puff out your cheeks, your jawline stays the same. It's maybe grabbing a little bit too much up here in the eye socket, and it's definitely coming too far back here in the ear. So to just do some artistic adjustment of that, you can create this model where you're doing the actual soft mod, and unfortunately you can't directly paint soft mod deformations. So to paint weights off of it, you have to take it, select another mesh, and create a blend shape. So now this model is getting that deformation.
Would it be wise to make another copy of it and then blend shape onto that one? And then have that be the local rig?
So this one would be a local rig, a single local rig. So you'd have one like for the eyelids and for the mouth, and then this would be a separate one from both of those. And then this could be plugged directly into the blend bridge where you paint weights off of it, or you could plug it into a buffer between the one that's receiving the deformations and the blend bridge one. And that just depends on how you want to manage it in the scene, if you find it easier to work with, but technically they both work the same. So now we have this one, and it's receiving the deformations of the soft mod, and I'm actually going to set some keys on the scale of the sphere just so we can see it puffing it out. And we can come down here and start painting blend shape weights. And I will replace it all with 0 and start painting it towards 100. So this is what it would look like just normally. We can start painting things away from it. We don't want it to come onto the ear at all. We don't want it down here on the jawline. We don't want it getting the nose. And of course that's not looking so great right now because it has a sharp edge. So we can just come in and smooth it, maybe add some more up here, but just artistically deciding how does it look? Does it look the way we want it to? And this is not going to look fantastic, one, because this character wouldn't be bulging their cheek out quite that much, and we're not going to spend that much time on it. You could also like scale it in multiple directions, like maybe your character needs more cheek puff forwards or more cheek puff to the side than forward. But this is just a technique that you guys can use to create that cheek puff. Like that's a very cartoonish one. And then you'd probably paint some weight out on it. Does that make sense as another technique to create cheek puff and cheek controls?
This is something you can do for the shape of the, I forget
The
what
pupil?
it's called, when your pupil is pushing on there, but not
Yeah.
fleshy eye.
Yeah, if you guys have ever seen, you guys have seen the movie Avatar, probably, because it's one of the highest grossing movies of all time. They showed this a lot where the character is asleep and he's moving his eyes under his eyelid and like there's like a bulge to it slightly. And that's because your pupil, or at least the film, the lens that covers your pupil, actually bulges out slightly from the rest of your eye and it moves the eyelid around. So this is a technique that you could use for that. You would just attach this to, you'd attach a sculpt deformer to like that middle vertice on your eye, and so as your eye rotated around, let me go into this mode. That's too much displacement for a pupil. Come on, it's gotta let me do those hotkeys. Yeah. But that's kind of what you'd be looking for. So you can create that kind of effect on a more realistic model. yeah, that's not going to look great because I've just scaled down a cheek one to make it work. But this is the technique that you'd use to easily get that kind of movement of the eyelid with the pupil underneath.
What kind of blend shapes would you want to put on the corners of the cheeks going home to make it look more like a face?
Yeah, so
Less like a vase.
so you'd have this one, and so you could come in and sculpt on top of that. And so I don't have the shapes plugin logged on. Oh, I do have it. Or maybe it will just not work for me. Oh, so it did. How nice. I pressed the wrong one too. So this is with the cheek effect coming from this. And the reason we don't want to just use this as a straight blend shape target is because with a blend shape, all the vertices move in a linear path directly to where they need to be. But this one, not all the vertices are moving in a straight line from their original position. Some of them are moving in more of an arced path to get from like here to out there as your cheek inflates. But once that's dialed in, you can come in here and add a sculpt with a... That's not the mesh I had selected. We can add another one. So I'll just add some of the volume coming in and smoothing out this area. Smooth this hat. And you could also combine that with like a pucker mouth shape, which you'd create for the rest of the mouth. So you could turn on the cheek one and turn on the pucker one, and they may work well together already, or you could create a corrective sculpt that gets triggered when they're both on. If we, I'll probably talk about mouth corner blend shapes, and I can talk about combination blend shapes when we do that. So, is that enough information about cheek deformations? Does that cover like your questions, Noah, or it's gonna help?
One other is like brought up for the soft mod. You can like actually have it rigged up to move the
Yes.
balls and have like animation on it. They're like chewing or something.
Yeah, so like this one, I just set 2 keys for the scale of it, but you could have set-driven keys driving its translations, its scales, its rotations. Rotations aren't going to do anything on this one because it's a sphere, but yes. So good on cheeks? Okay. What do we want to do next? Because this is sort of just a poo-poo platter or a crash course. What, Rebecca? Okay.
That's what it's not a poo-poo platter. Think of poo-poo platters. It's just delicious. So.
Hey, Bug's Life is comedy gold.
Yeah.
So nothing.
I'm trying to figure out Bug's Life.
They make that joke in Bug's Life when they're at the bar and like the waitress comes up like, "Who ordered the poo-poo platter?" and all the flies like swarm on it. Yeah. There's a reason Pixar doesn't talk about that movie. You were gonna?
Yeah, but if you have like a geometry, separate geometry for the eyebrow, how would you attach it to the brow bone?
Oh, okay. So this guy doesn't have separate geometry for eyebrows because he doesn't have any eyebrows.
Did you find that or just
I just deleted it.
what happened to the cheek now?
Yeah, it's not. Let me get to the. I hit delete by type history, and I'll delete all these bones.
And his eyes.
Did I delete his eyes?
Yes.
Oh wow.
Don't need eyebrows.
No time.
I think we've already done the eye part.
So he doesn't have any eyebrows that are separate mesh, so I'm just going to quickly create some real simple one to show off the principle.
Make it a unibrow.
A unibrow?
Of course.
I'll do a single brow, but it's not going to be a unibrow.
That's basically a unibrow. Like half a unibrow.
So here is our brow. Probably doesn't need that many subdivisions of depth. I'll give it like 3. It's something you guys should be aware of and tell every modeler that you know in existence. Undo.
Oh,
What is this?
So we should be aware of that.
Like, I just, let me first
Try
be,
using the menu button for undo.
well no, I'm just trying to delete this and it's like not letting the delete key work. I'm gonna reset preferences and see if I just do the script editor. Edit, revert to save, no, revert to default. Now, this better work. Okay, everything seems okay. You want the eyelid to have its bottom edge matching up with an edge on the rest of the mesh. So like here, we have an edge right here, so I'd want the bottom to match up kind of like this one, or at least to be contained within a certain number of faces. If they have the eyebrow centered on an edge like this and partway up a face like this and a face like this, when this face starts to bend or deform, this section of the eyebrow is just going to be floating off from the face.
Oh, yeah.
But if you had it lined up nicely with a bottom edge on the face and a bottom edge on the top here, then it's always going to stay attached to that face on the mesh. And it will always stay attached to like the face of the face. Does that make sense? I know I said face a lot.
Okay. You want to
Okay,
match up with
I'm going to say it again because I know that I just said words. You want the bottom edge of the eyebrows mesh to match up with an edge on the face mesh.
Say on the brow. Say on the brow.
On the brow.
Instead, yeah.
Bottom of the brow to match up with an edge on the face. Top of the brow to match up with another edge on the face.
There you go.
So that,
What if the eyebrow is too big and can't be matched up with the top?
how big? Like this big?
Sure.
Have them just slide that edge. Because if they don't, and this one starts to deform, I'll grab it. It could potentially detach because there's not faces that this eyebrow is specifically attached to. It's only partially connected to this face, right? Because these two faces aren't going to remain straight for the eyebrow to attach to anymore. Okay? That's like a guideline, and it's always going to be helpful. Sometimes it's not going to matter if their eyebrows are like floating off their face and they're extremely cartoony, but for a realistic character, this is very important.
Is it better to have the eyebrow simply not detached from the face?
I don't really have a preference when it comes to that. If it can be attached and it's not going to cause any issues for the texturer, then I'd like it to be attached. But sometimes it can cause issues if it is attached because, like, if the faces were to stretch, it would look like the flesh and like the hair was stretching when you need the eyebrow to maintain its actual shape. Okay, so keeping it attached. I'm just going to create some simple joints on the mesh. For why is it like this? I'm going to create some simple joints. Select them, select the mesh, select the eyebrow. I should actually create a filler joint first. So select all the joints, select the two meshes, skin bind skin. And so right now, that's not looking so great, but it doesn't really matter. But you are going to spend most of your time, if they are separate meshes, painting skin weights on this mesh. So to show what that would look like, it's like, let's say I actually want no influence to be given to this middle brow control, for whatever reason. So I just flood it all to 0, but right now this eyebrow still has that influence. If we go back to the original position, by turning off the skin cluster, we can select this mesh, and select the eyebrow mesh, and go to Skin, Copy Skin Weights, and usually raycast is the best one to do it. That just sends out a ray kind of from the normal of the surface to any vertice on this new mesh, and uses that vertex's skin weights as the vertex skin weights on this mesh. Does that make sense? What the copy skin weights works? So we just copied it, So now, if I were to turn the skin cluster back on for the eyebrow, didn't work so great, but it has significantly less weight on this. And if we'd matched it up better, we would have gotten better skin weights. But this is the basic way, in terms of workflow, that you'd have to do to keep the eyebrow attached. It's just you always need to be copying the skin weights from the body mesh to the eyebrow so that they have the same ones. Is that what your question was about? Or
Yeah, but if you do this one over performance like that one.
wrap deformers, like if you were to skin weight the face mesh and then have a separate mesh for the eyebrows that were wrapped to it. Wrap deformers can be a lot slower, and you can also run into issues when you use global scale, because the wrap deformer doesn't always global scale nicely. Wire deformers could work fine. If you have a wire deformer that's influencing the main mesh, it can also be influencing the eyebrow mesh, and it should work out nicely as long as your skin weights or your blend shape weights are set up nicely. I prefer to use joints to other methods of creating eyebrow deformations because you have more control. And you also get all of the motions at the same time. You get like side to side and up and down. But yeah.
Do you usually set it up on the local
When I do facial rigging, the only thing that I ever put on the global rig is the jaw control, because sometimes you need the joints in the neck to work well together with the jaw deformations. Everything else, like eyelids, nose, mouth, eyebrows, I do on a local rig. Sometimes you'll break them into multiple local rigs. So yeah, I would recommend doing no facial rigging except for the jaw on the global rig. Okay. So, I don't know what's next, what you guys are interested in seeing. This is definitely a crash course. Like, I'm not finely tuning any of these techniques, but I hope I'm throwing things out that you can try out for yourselves.
If you do blendshapes on local rigs, if you want to delete the faces on the body, and how to use only the local rig of the face and make it influence the internal mesh on the local rig.
Okay. This is something that I don't do very often because I don't always remember how to do it, but hopefully I'll be able to do it on the spot. Ethan, do you specifically remember how to do it? Because when you detach the head to create a blend shape target that is just the head.
I don't know how to do it. Just make it connect it back again.
Yeah, you select the
Yeah.
faces, then you say extract, and then you duplicate it, and then you attach it back to the mesh.
Yeah.
And you just have to remember to merge the components. That's your
Before you do the, you do a blend shape with the local.
So you do
cut
all
out head.
blend shapes and then you connect that?
No, you can just duplicate one mesh.
Hey.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so like we'd be starting out with this. Let's say I just want that stuff to be stored out somewhere that I'm using for a local rig. I can go to Edit Mesh, Extract, and ignore that. There's weird stuff with this model's normals. So now I have this as a separate mesh. I can duplicate it, move it off, and then I just need to come over here and merge those vertices
First you do the blend shape.
from here to here.
Yeah.
To form blend shape. Mesh combine, just to join them back together. Edit mesh merge, and the default settings should grab everything along here. So now, if I do anything on here and have the blend shape actually on, it'll do it over there.
That one would be your bridge and then you have everything you're going back
Yeah. For whatever reason, it was running a bit slow when
What
I...
I do is I do like one whole body.
Has it got to do with the
Blend
normal?
shapes, so that
I don't think so.
forget
It may have been that I had them both smooth.
having done it up, I can do that later and I still can connect it. So you do like the whole body and start first.
One thing, I don't think you do the blend shape before you merge them, because the whole point of that is to get the vertex orders the same. But if I run the blend shape and then I merge them, that's history that's added after the deformer, which would make it run more slowly, right?
I don't know, I always did it that way. That's how
I did too.
Okay.
Just
Okay,
let's
so like,
try it. Let's
yeah, so like
try
right
it.
now I have it them both smoothed, and it's running very slowly. If I were to set this one,
that could be because this is like super high volume as compared.
it's not. It's
And
not
also
so
these
heavy.
computers,
Yeah. So
Let's just try it.
yeah, we'll try it.
Connecting afterwards.
So I'm going to delete all the history on this one. That's one thing to note. Do not delete the history after you merge the verts, because you need that extract and then polyunite history so that it keeps the vertex orders the same. Does that make sense? No?
You lost it.
Okay, well I'll show it when I do it the second time. So we have select the mesh, edit mesh, extract. So now I have them as separate meshes. I'm going to take the face, duplicate it and drag it over. And then I'm going to take them both, mesh combine, so they're one mesh again. But of course those vertices aren't connected anymore. So I need to come edit mesh, merge. And everything looks fine. And I should be able to delete history now. I'm actually going to just duplicate it to delete the history so we have a backup. And then I'm going to take this to form blend shape, and we'll see if it works. So I can drag that up. If I turn on the blend shape, it's either going to work or just... Did I? And right now it is running smoothly even though they're both smooth. So it did wind up making a difference.
So you want to make, so you want to do the like sculpting or whatever on the blend shape.
So
after
yeah, so the order of it to get this blend shape target is select the head, faces, extract them, duplicate them off, then merge the original body and the original head back together, delete history on it, and then you can use that head that you duplicated off as a blend shape target for the whole body. And so if you wanted like another blend shape target or a local rig, you would just take this one that's just the head and duplicate it to create all your targets. So does that make sense for how you do that? Okay.
And would you, before you reattached, do you typically make a blend shape that's just the body from the head down as well? Because if you have I'm curious as to like what would happen if you have all your, well no, I guess it really wouldn't make a difference.
Yeah, it wouldn't make a difference because blend shapes, what they do is they store vertex information. In Maya, whatever the vertex's position is when there are no deformers on. So that means blend shapes or tweaks. Like let's say I were to just drag one. Oh, do I have blend shape on? If I were to drag one off like this, that is a tweak because I've created that after I've like frozen transforms and deleted history. So if I come to the tweak input and turn it off, that didn't happen anymore. So that's where most of your like sculpting deformations are stored. They're stored on this tweak deformation, and this is always on by default, but you can turn it off if you wanted to. If I have it turned off though, you can no longer sculpt because it's trying to store that information in a deformer that's off. So it stores every vertex's position when all of the deformers are off as 0, 0, 0. All of the vertex positions are relative. So what blend shapes do is they store how much that vertex's position has changed. They don't store its final position. So for the head, where there is no body, because there is no body to reference, it says, okay, every vertex on the body has moved 0, 0, 0, and so it doesn't affect anything on the body when this is the blend shape target. If we were to do the opposite and cut off the head and just have a blend shape target that's the body, it would ignore every vertex on the head and just to assume that they hadn't moved at all. Does that answer your question about what would happen if you did that?
Yeah, I just like, the thing that always makes me like, well, I wonder if it would, if you're having like blend shapes on your body as well, and you kept the head attached, when you were to bring those back into your global, would the faces, or the vertices of the face that's still attached to the body fight at all with the ones that you've plugged in, like the bridge from the head?
So like if I had a blend shape, this is the one that actually has the blend shape on it, where it has this as a target, I can have a full body one that is also a target. Blend shape add, blend shape 1, apply. And so it will add on to those deformations.
Yeah, but not if you like just don't move them, it's fine.
Yeah. So if I had just left that alone and come down here to the body, it doesn't like wipe out the deformations from the head.
Yeah, I just was always wondering if it would make an average of them.
Yeah, because blend shapes are always additive, so it would just add on to them. And in this case, it's adding nothing. So let's try and get this guy back to normal. Okay, so that is detaching the head so that you can use just the head as a blend shape target. What other stuff do we want to see or hear about?
Do you use 3 joints for the corner?
Yeah, so when I set up the lips, I either use the surface technique, which we're probably not going to go today because it is long-winded, and I still haven't finessed it all the way. But otherwise, I use 3 joints in the corner, just so you can kind of adjust the sharpness, and then I have ribbon lips on the top and bottom.
Is there a specific way that you orient the ribbon so that
Yeah, we can do
it's like a good...
a ribbon lip. So I'm going to come in here, and so that I can get a nice edge where the 2 lips are sealed, I'm actually just going to select these faces on the bottom of the lip and do isolate select. Is it going to actually isolate them for me, or no? Guess not. So I'm going to have to try and get in there and grab an edge where they're kind of sealed together. Maybe it would be easier from the inside. So this looks like an edge where the 2 lips are sealed. Or at least close enough. So I'm going to come up to modify, convert polygon edge to curve. So now we have that edge as a curve. And I'm going to duplicate it and just drag it back in world space so that this is kind of the form that the ribbon is going to take. It matches up with the shape of the lip. I'm going to select both curves, and I'll actually flatten them because the edge that I selected wasn't quite flat. And then I can either type in the command loft, or I can come up to surfaces and do loft. I usually type in the command because I'm usually in the rigging tab where there is no modeling dropdown. But if you're already in the modeling dropdown, you can just come up here and do loft. And what loft does is it takes the 2 curves and it makes a NURB surface out of them that goes between the 2 of them. So I'll just delete those original 2 curves. I have this new lofted surface. So what a ribbon lip does is it lets you, we're going to have joints attached to the ribbon, and then we're going, like we can have 7 joints attached to the ribbon, but we can be driving the shape of the ribbon using only 3 or 5 joints, so that you are giving the animator fewer controls, but the rigger has more control over the deformation of the lips. Because the rigger works with 7 joints, but the animator only has to deal with 5. So to do that, we're going to, what?
I said we're 3.
Or 3. Yeah. to do that, we're going to use follicles. So I can come up here to FX, N hair, and do create N hair. And let's say we want 7 joints. We'll do V count 7, and we may need to switch the U and V. We'll find out. And I was right. I can never consistently know whether I should put 7 as the U or 7 as the V, depending on how the surface is created. But it's easy if it doesn't create it the right way that you want it to, just delete it or hit Ctrl-Z and switch them. So I'll just delete all the extra stuff that N hair creates, which are these simulated curves. Thanks, Maya. Let me delete things. But it also creates these follicles, which are these red things that are attached to the surface. So if I drag the surface around, Maya, please just let me have this. They always stay attached, and they're always pointing up from the surface. Even if I were to grab some of the control vertices and drag them around, they still stay attached to the surface and normal to the surface, meaning they're pointing out and away. So what we want is we want joints attached to this surface. So we're going to delete these extra groups that it creates, and we're going to put a joint under each follicle as a child of it. It's faster to use the command joint, just typing in joint with a semicolon when you have the follicle selected, because that will create the joint as a child of whatever you have selected, which means it will be in the right position and it will have the right orientation. So I will just press G on each follicle to repeat that joint command, because G is the hotkey to repeat the most recent command, and I'll set their radius all to 0.1 so that they're a bit smaller. 0.01. Doesn't matter. Now we have joints attached here, and if I were to grab the control vertices on this surface, we can see that they move with it and kind of create a curved path of the joints. So to drive this surface, to deform it, we don't want to be just coming in and grabbing control vertices and dragging them around. We need joints with controls. So I'm going to isolate select this, and we are just going to snap some joints, thanks, to it. 0.02, so it's a bit bigger than the ones that are attached. I'll put 2 in the corner, and I will put 1 in the middle. I need it to snap. There we go. And I guess I'll put 2 kind of in between those 2. 1 right there. And 1 right there. I'm going to select all those, select the ribbon, rigging, skin bind skin. So now those joints are driving the ribbon. So when I do this, it lifts up part of the ribbon, which lifts up those joints. And those joints are creating a nice curved path. You can imagine just by moving this one control, the animator has gotten kind of like this shape to their mouth. When if you were to give them control over every individual joint that's going to be bound to the mesh, they'd have to move 3 controls and rotate 2 of them, which takes a lot longer than just doing that. So I'll move that back to the original position. I'm going to create a filler joint that's going to grab all the rest of the weight on the face. And then I'm going to take these joints that are attached to the ribbon and that filler joint, and I'm going to skin bind skin. So they are now bound to it. And I'll set a key on this control. So when I move this down, it's not going to look great because it's default skin weights, but that's looking pretty nice for the lower lip. So all we need to do to kind of fix it, please just set a key for me when I press S. No, Maya, Maya, baby, please. Okay, let's see if we can.
Does your rig die?
Yes. Like
It's a viewport thing, is what it is.
I don't know.
problem.
I'm gonna save it just to the desktop. Close my.
Would you put this ribbon on the original, or would that also be on the local rig?
I would put it on a local rig because you're gonna combine it with blend shapes, and you don't want those to be interfering with each other.
That's separate local rig again. They're all
You can do as many separate local rigs as you want. You can do one for the mouth, you can do one for like the eyelids, one for the eyebrows. But if you need to be able to balance influence from some of those controls, like for example, these vertices down here, kind of at the edge of the eye socket, are going to get some influence from the eyelid controls, but they're also going to be getting influence from the cheek controls. So it would be harder to balance those influences if they're coming from two separate local rigs onto a blend shape. So you may want to put whatever joint influence you have from the cheeks and whatever you have on eyelids on the same local rig.
or
The
put
same-
on separate ones and then have a bridge and then have another bridge.
No,
No.
because you'd want it to be normalized, right? So that's one of the benefits of having joints as your control. Like on your eye, like if you did blend shapes for your eyebrows, and I said I want to blend shape when this part's up, I want to blend shape when this part's up, I want to blend shape when this part's up. It's going to take a lot of time and work to get them so they add up when they're all triggered to one where the entire eyebrow moves up. Because blend shapes normally aren't normalized; they don't add up to 100% influence over a vertice. If I were to set up a local rig with 3 joints in the eyebrow and however many joints on my eyelids, I may need to adjust how much weight is coming from the eyelids and how much is coming from the eyebrows for these vertices that are kind of just above the eye socket or right on the eye socket. Because when I blink, those get pulled down slightly into a straighter line, but they also get stretched or pulled down when I move my eyebrows. So having those on the same local rig will make that easier because I can just paint weights between them. But if they're on 2 separate local rigs going into a blend shape, you have to like switch between which local rig you're working on to try and balance them out. Some people would say to do everything on one local rig, and maybe they're right because you need to balance the eyebrows with the eyelids, and the eyelids need to be balanced with the cheeks, and the cheeks need to be balanced with the mouth. So why not just do it all in one? Probably in the professional setting, that is what you should do. I find it hard to work that way because then I'm dealing with a lot of joints and a lot of influences, and it's harder to paint. For me to paint skin weights with that many influences in the menu. So I usually break it into eyelids, eyebrows, and then cheeks and mouth as a separate one, so I have 2 local rigs. But if you want to do 4 and just deal with trading between them or your character the way that they're built, it's not going to be an issue, then you can do it that way. Okay, so I saved it and I reopened Maya, so let's hope that it will not break when I open it again. That looks beautiful. I'm not going to bother with the body because the body's already perfect. So let me just grab this filler one. I'm just going to grab everything kind of up here and flood it to 1 for the filler joint so that it has no influence from the ribbon lips. And then I can start painting. Come on, just get, I was just making it smaller. But I just look like a crazy person as I'm clicking and dragging and nothing's happening. Yeah, so I can just start painting weights away from this bottom lip. And that's looking decent. I'll grab another joint here. Oh my goodness, that's the wrong one. That's not the one I meant to grab. We'll grab that one. So that's not looking so good either. We can paint away that weight on the upper lip just to our filler joint. So now that one looks better. We're getting some nice curves to this mouth with just a minimal amount of work. That of course is not very good. But you'd be doing this for the top and the bottom lip. You'd have a ribbon lip here and a ribbon lip here. What you were asking about was doing 3 mouth joints in the corner of the mouth. The ribbons don't really handle those deformations very well. Like when we look over here in the corner, we're not really keeping a nice tight corner, and right now this one is just dragging the entire thing. So usually what you want to do is have, let me set this back to its default pose, your ribbon lip and then you could have a joint here on the very corner of the mouth, and then maybe 1 or 2 edge loops out. And you'd just be using those to tweak the very corners of the mouth. So if they were open the mouth wide with the lips, these two don't really stay sharp, they get more rounded, and to give the animator control over that, they can just move those vertices up to kind of round out the corners of your mouth when you open it up wide with the lips. It's just like a extra little tweak control that the animator is going to want to have access to in order to get the perfect mouth shape. So that is a good answer for that question, and that's ribbon lips in a nutshell.
Do you do like separate blend shapes for all the lip shapes, like house, pucker, crest, funnel, stuff like that?
So what I'd always done in the past is I would do a blend shape for mouth out, when you pull your mouth corner out like this, one for when you're going in to pucker, and then one up, one down, and then a combination for when you move up and out into like a wide smile or like a wide frown. And that is a very good system to use. That's what Josh Sobel teaches in his tutorials. The drawback of that is it doesn't work very well with zipper lips and the jaw. Because if you open the jaw like this, and then you want to zip it kind of from the outside in, I'm going to pull up a quick demo reel just so you know what I'm talking about, because if nobody's seen, if you haven't seen zipper lips, then I probably am not coming across very clear. So you're going to see the jaw open, and it's going to start sealing from the outside in, like that. And in order for that to work, you have to have influence over each individual vertice along the lips. And to do that, you want a lot of joints that have the same pivot as the jaw, but are attached to those vertices. When you're using that system, using mouth corner blend shapes isn't compatible anymore, because you would dial in those blend shapes to widen the mouth, and then all of those joints that used to be attached to those vertices aren't anymore, because now the vertices have moved out, but the joints have remained in place. So there may be a way to get them to work together. What I've been doing is driving those vertices on a surface, and then using their positions on the surface to drive the blend shapes, so I can use them both together. That's getting pretty complicated, like having zipper lips and mouth corner blend shapes.
Are you using something like a closest point on surface constraint?
I'm using follicles or in constraints.
The follicles are aimed at the surface. Like the follicles are on the
This is
face.
getting into the surface-based facial rigging, which is like a whole can of worms. But yes, doing mouth corner blend shapes out, up, down, in is like one of the simplest, one of the fastest ways that you're going to get a nice looking rig. But eventually you might need a rig that needs an advanced feature like that zipper lip, in which case you're going to have to find an alternative solution. But 90% of the time on like a film that you're going to do here at SCAD, mouth corner blend shapes are a fine way to do the mouth corners. Bueno. Yeah. Yes.
What besides the following curve are the benefits of surface-based?
Okay.
In a nutshell.
In a nutshell. Some of it, so when you use blend shapes, all of the vertices travel in a straight line from each other. So let's say I have a character that's like, their face is extremely round, it's like Kirby. And I need a blend shape where Kirby's mouth corners are moving from here out to wider on his face. But what's going to happen is all those vertices are going to cut a straight line through his face, and he's going to get like a flattened section of his face instead of staying round the entire time. Joints can solve that problem because you can have the joints drag the vertices along that curved path of the surface. And you can see that shown off pretty nicely in a demo reel by Stephen Kandel, who was the rigger on Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. So if you look here, he's distributed a lot of joints along the face, and even when he's like widened the mouth or creating the mouth like shape like this, the silhouette and the shape of Brett's face remains the same the entire time. And you couldn't do that with just blend shapes. What he talks about in like the comments on his demo reel is that he's driving all of these joints on the surface using controls and set-driven keys in order to get these shapes. So instead of doing blend shapes on vertices, he does a sort of blend shape on the positions of the joints.
So the answer to the question is effectively there is no more than that, but that's enough to do it.
You avoid the problems that linear interpolation of blend shapes have. For example, a better example would be on the Peanuts movie, because you imagine their head needs to stay like perfectly round, like there can't be any changes in the silhouette of their head. That is not the right one. I'm looking for this one. Yeah, it's a UVN face, Charlie Brown. Yeah. So for them, they need to keep like the silhouette perfectly the same the entire time. So in their system, they had a NURB surface that's kind of shaped like a sphere, that's the shape of their face, and they map every vertex to a UV position on the surface, and they also give it a normal position, which is how far from the surface it is, which is kind of like how thick your fat would be on like your skull. And so they're running blend shapes to say, okay, go from this UV position to this UV position and change your distance from the surface by a certain amount. And by using that, they keep the silhouette of the character perfect the entire time. This one is like it's a heavier system because it has to run those calculations for every vertice on the character's face. But they need to do it because that's the aesthetic of their film. Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs isn't quite that cartoonish. It is extremely cartoonish, but there is like some fat or like change to the silhouette of their face when they move around. So for them, they had the joints move along the surface and out from it in the normal direction. And then they kind of like blended the influence from those joints for the vertices. So instead of running the calculation for every vertice, they ran it for every joint, which is a lot faster and it's simpler to set up. And it got them to what they needed to do. If they had used a UVN deformer, they would have wound up with the same result, but it would have been a lot of development time that they didn't need to do. Blue Sky Studios for the Peanuts movie had to put in all that time. So that is the benefit of using surface-based facial rigging. You can have sections of the mesh moved in a curved path and maintain volume better than a blend shape can, or just a straight movement of the joint. Okay, that started to get into some complicated stuff, but yeah, but some people don't know what a NURB surface is yet. Maybe. There are some new riggers here, Rebecca. If I say follicle, some people don't know what a follicle is yet.
Oh, but nerves is like, yeah.
What does NURB stand for?
What does it stand for? Question, but to know what it is.
Yeah.
It is non.
It's like non-uniform radial-based
Yeah,
spline.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's it.
Let's find out.
I said non.
Non-uniform rational basis spline. So not radial-based, rational basis.
That's okay.
I don't define my value by my ability to know what NURB means. I'm just giving Rebecca a hard time. Yeah. Okay. If people are like starting to get tired or need to be somewhere, you guys can feel free to leave. I don't know if people are getting antsy. Or if I'm just so riveting that I'm just